Big market sell-off this hour. It is ugly out there. The S&P 500 down 3.7%. The Nasdaq's down 4.5%. Not many places to hide in this equity market today. The Dow is down 1,400 points as we speak, as the onslaught of tariffs is announced by President Trump and the administration.
Calling these reciprocal is not really.
We don't use that word. We're done using that word.
We're done using that because that's just I don't want to call it a lie. It's dissembling.
At this moment in time, with the market down 1,238 points right now on the Dow Industrials and the Nasdaq down 800 right now, and the market's not even open. Futures indicating a very ugly opening. Now would be the time for some clarity on extending the tax cuts.
But President Donald Trump has declared that America had survived his tariffs, which seems like a premature statement, but nonetheless, he made that statement before the market had even opened this morning. And you just saw what happened in the market. So things are not looking good, very grim for investors. But let's get to his full statement. Trump posted, "The operation is over. The patient lived and is healing. The prognosis is that the patient will be far stronger, bigger, better, and more resilient than ever before. Make America great again," in all caps.
Yeah, I think, Anna, that if you have to explain that the patient survived, that maybe you shouldn't have gone in that direction. So like, it's a hell of a thing to say, "I've got liberation. This is like the greatest thing that's ever happened for this country." We barely survived. We're still alive. Okay, but I think we're gonna make it. Not really comforting. Look, I know that he's saying, yeah, there's gonna be short-term pain, and they knew the market was gonna turn down, but I don't think they expected it to turn down this much. It finished at over 1,600 down, and it's an epic disaster, and as you're gonna see throughout the show, Republicans panicking over and going, for the first time, Trump, what name so? I don't know anything about Trump. So,
yeah.
And I'll tell you why they're doing this. And Maria Bartiromo, what she said at the end of that clip we just showed you, is a huge part of the reason why they're doing this.
And look, part of the issue that is leading to this downturn in the stock market is the fact that there's even now still a lot of uncertainty. Is Trump serious about this? Is he really gonna go through with these astronomical tariffs on foreign imports to the United States? And of course, it really varies depending on which country we're talking about. But as he announced yesterday, there is a baseline 10% tariff on all countries or companies from other countries that import products into the United States. Those tariffs are not paid by the foreign countries or the foreign companies that are, exporting products to the United States. Those tariffs are paid by US companies, and those US companies tend to pass off the costs to American consumers. So certainly inflation, which is still a problem, is going to be more of a problem if Trump does in fact move forward with these tariffs. So with that in mind, we've heard all sorts of arguments from the Trump administration in regard to why he wants to do this. Early on in his second term, we heard that he was doing it because he wants to stop the flow of fentanyl into the United States. But one of the more consistent messages from Trump is that he wants to bring manufacturing back to the US. And what I found really fascinating is that while Trump says one thing, you have Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick speaking to CNBC, and he's done these types of statements in other interviews as well, essentially talking about what the real plan is in regard to American jobs. Let's take a look.
We all hold our iPhones, which we love. Why do they have to be made in Taiwan and China? Why can't those be made with robotics in America? And you know what Donald Trump has said? They're going to be made in America. Factories are coming back, and here's the key. Factories now can use robotics. And so American workers can be much more efficient with robotics. You're going to see the greatest surge in training for what we call tradecraft, teaching people how to be robotics mechanics.
I feel pretty comfortable stating that I don't think this is really about bringing jobs to America. And you also have to keep in mind, the unemployment rate is still pretty low. And I mean, it's so low that right now in the state of Florida, as a result of the mass deportation of undocumented immigrants in this country, the state legislature is looking to loosen up child labor laws so they have enough workers to fill the jobs vacated by undocumented immigrants.
Yeah, actually, if you pay attention to what Lutnick is saying, he just started talking about robotics.
Right.
You know what robotics does? It replaces jobs.
Humans, it replaces humans.
Yeah,
yes.
So he's like, oh, we'll have a couple of mechanics left to run the robots after we fire all of you. And you see how this is gonna lead to job creation in America. No, I don't actually. You can say positive things about robotics and AI taking over, but you can't say that it creates net positive jobs when the whole point is to eliminate assembly lines, truck drivers, on and on and on. So that's just they say these talking points and no one challenges them. So that was outrageous. And then, guys, for this to work, if you wanted to do tariffs, you would do them in a targeted way for industries that you want to get back up on their feet, right? And you would have a sense of what's my mission? How long am I going to do this for? When do I know that we've won, right? Et cetera. But no matter how you slice it, it would take years for these tariffs to work because it would require people to then build factories here, have the factories create products, and then put them into cars or whatever else that they're doing. That would take, 2-3 years at a bare minimum, but probably 5-10 years realistically. So really we're gonna have all of these tariffs for 10 years? For 3 years? No, we're not. This is all a giant trick. Again, I'll tell you why in a sec.
So as for the markets, obviously things are very turbulent right now. Time will only tell what Trump will actually decide to do. Obviously, there are a lot of people who are hoping that he's not really gonna go through with this. But as I had mentioned yesterday, after he made these announcements, there are some tariffs that he had threatened to implement, and he did in fact implement them. The 25% auto tariffs, those are now in place. The tariffs that he had implemented against Chinese companies importing products to the United States, those tariffs are also still in place. Those are from his first term. So I think he's serious about some of these tariffs. The others, I'm not entirely sure. And again, that uncertainty is really playing out in the stock market. Now, as far as Trump's approval rating goes, these policies could be a huge issue for the president and the whole of the Republican Party, as Harry Enton is about to lay out.
Oppose new tariffs on other countries. All goods, look at this. 56% of Americans oppose new tariffs on all goods. How about cars in particular? 56% of Americans oppose new tariffs on imported cars and car parts. Look, the bottom line is the American people oppose. No. They do not want new tariffs. I looked at a ton of polling. It's really hard to find any in which you find folks supporting new tariffs, maybe against China, but against all other countries, especially our allies, no. 72% of Americans overall say that the prices will go up in the short term. How about among Republicans, the Republican base? This was a shocker to me. 64% of Republicans believe that tariffs will in fact cause prices to go up in the near term. And get this, just 5% of Americans overall believe that tariffs, at least in the short term, will bring down prices. You don't have to be a mathematical genius to know, Mr. Berman, that 72 beats 5. Should be a high priority for Trump. Number 1, the economy at 82. Number 2, inflation, 80. Look at this, tariffs. 8 out of 8 on the list in terms of things that should be a high priority for Donald Trump at just 30%.
So will Trump be creeped out by some of the numbers that are coming out in these polls? His approval rating in regard to his handling of the economy was already bad. He was underwater in that regard. This isn't gonna help, and there are two different things happening. So Trump seems to care to some extent about what his base thinks. There are some voters in his base who are super active on social media and they're super supportive of what's happening right now, which I thought was interesting. But the other thing that I'll say is, Howard Lutnick in early February had a meeting with all these, corporate executives. Jeff Bezos was part of this meeting. Tim Cook was part of the meeting, and they wanted to kind of get ahead of this tariffs announcement, hoping that Trump wouldn't go through with it. And Lutnick basically told them to kick rocks and think about what they can do to help the country. So there's a part of me that thinks, oh my God, they're really serious about this. But then there's another part of me that thinks, maybe not, and maybe there would be enough backlash from the Trump base or American voters that he'll change the direction he's going in, but I don't know.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit more confident about what's going to happen. So let me get to it. First of all, to be fair, 64% of Republicans think that prices are going to go up, as Anton pointed out, but they're not all against it because in this case, Trump and his team did a decent job of telling people the markets are going to turn down. There is going to be some pain in the short term. So that's why Republicans also know that there was not like myth-making nonsense about how prices are magically going to go down, right? And they were savvy enough at least to do that because they would have been wrong instantly, right? So okay, so that doesn't mean all Republicans are against it, but I thought the last poll that Anton showed was more important. 30% saying tariffs are their top issue and are the right way to go. That's Trump's base, like that's his core base, 30%. But the other 70% are anywhere from skeptical to hell no, and so that does not bode well for him. And so one of our members on TYT.com, Spider-Man Dragon, had a good line. He said, Trump better be careful, Bush declared victory in Iraq and we ended up staying there. So I was saying the same thing as Trump was declaring victory on Liberation Day. Like, brother, I'm pretty sure the mission ain't anywhere near accomplished yet, and the first day has been very, very rocky. So, but don't worry, a lot of people writing in as well about, oh my God, this is gonna destroy the 401ks, et cetera. It's not gonna do any of those things because it's not gonna be around that long. So first, let me explain why they did a nuke here when they actually could have done tariffs that made sense. Like I said, you could do specific industries, manufacturing. You could do it in a way where it actually was reciprocal. These were not reciprocal. They did this crazy math on how they came to these outrageously high numbers. So why do it in the first place? Well, there's 3 reasons. Number one, Trump loves tariffs and believes you can eliminate income tax with them. In fact, I'm gonna show you a clip about that in a sec. And so he said that many times, like really eliminating income tax, but he genuinely believes it. Number 2, there have been no consequences in the past for his tariffs because he would threaten tariffs, giant tariffs, he would bluff and do all these things, and the other side would crumble, and they folded almost every time. So there seemed to be no downside to doing massive tariffs because the other side always folded. In this case, the markets are convinced, and you're about to see soon from Europe, Japan, South Korea, Canada, Mexico, et cetera, that no, they're not going to fold. They're going to fight back, and when they fight back, we're going to fold. So number 3 is, this is all an excuse, this is the most important one, to cut taxes by trillions for corporations and the wealthy.
Ding, 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 ding.
And so that's why you saw Bartiromo say at the end there, like, well, we better get news on those tax cuts soon, right? So because what they're going to do is, oh, look, renewing Trump's tax cuts, well, that's $4.5 trillion. And they decided recently, and we're gonna story we're gonna share with you in a little bit, that they're gonna add another $1.5 trillion in tax cuts.
Insanity.
So and guess, whoa, that's $6 trillion. Guess what they said last week about the tariffs? That they would magically raise $6 trillion. Okay, so once, and by the way, they're pushing them through right now. That's why it's a story later in the rundown, right? So if those, whatever happens with those tax cuts, very likely they'll pass because the Democrats will go, oh my God, we are so upset. Oh, there was nothing we could do, right? And the rich will get another $6 trillion. The minute that's signed, you could forget about the tariffs. You'll never see the tariffs again. Okay, they'll take away all the tariffs. Maybe they'll leave a couple of symbolic ones in. But overall, last time you'll ever see the tariffs, because it was all a total BS way of saying, don't worry about the $6 trillion we're about to give the wealthy. It won't create any deficits. They needed an excuse, this is it.
So look, you gotta give Trump some credit for being a unifier because he is unifying the globe against the United States. Because even if the prediction you're making here, and I think there's a good reason for why you're making this prediction. I think you have good reason to believe this. Even if it plays out the way you suspect, our trade partners have already begun forging new trade relationships, right? So Japan and South Korea figuring out ways to make trade deals with one another to squeeze us out entirely. So even if this is temporary, there is some potential permanent damage that can be done.
Yeah, 2 things about that. So first, even some Republican commentators and politicians are beginning to say, yeah, but when people in my district go bankrupt because of these, they're not gonna be able to rebuild their businesses. So like once the prices go up or for them in terms of their supply chain, right? And they have to pass those on and people don't wanna pay them, they're out of money and it's over. You can't get those businesses back. So he's doing massive short-term pain here, as I wouldn't worry about the long term because they're not gonna last. But in the short term, he's gonna break a lot of things, and all just for a little magic trick to distract you from their real goal, which is the tax cuts. But if you think, yeah, but Trump, guys, you guys must be doing hyperbole. Like, he can't really think we're gonna get rid of all income tax because of tariffs. That's mental. That's the great majority of the way that we get revenue for the federal government. Watch.
From 1789 to 1913, we were a tariff-backed nation, and the United States was proportionately the wealthiest it has ever been. Then in 1913, for reasons unknown to mankind, they established the income tax so that citizens, rather than foreign countries, would start paying the money necessary to run our government. Then in 1929, it all came to a very abrupt end with the Great Depression. And it would have never happened if they had stayed with the tariff policy. It would have been a much different story. In the old days, when we were smart, when we were a smart country, in the 1890s and all, this is when the country was relatively the richest it ever was. It had all tariffs. It didn't have an income tax.
Yes, sir.
Okay? Now we have income taxes, and we have people that are dying. They're paying tax, and they don't have the money to pay the tax. We used to be an all-tariff country, and then in the 1900s, they brilliantly went to the income tax, where everybody gets taxed, and foreign companies could come in and just steal our treasure.
This knucklehead really thinks that he could get rid of income taxes because they did it in the 1890s. That's been his dream for a long, long time. I didn't come up with this out of thin blue air. Donald Trump's been saying this actually for decades, and we just grabbed a bunch of clips for you guys while he was president. He really believes that, and he's about to find out that dream isn't gonna come true.
Those were clips from when he was running to become president for a second term. And I'm glad that, the Democrats were on it and they really campaigned against it, because it was the one thing, by the way, that Trump has been very consistent on.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.